Bethesda is the new kid on the block when it comes to E3 press conferences, joining the usual suspects 3 years ago. Since their first ever E3 conference in 2015, they delivered consistently entertaining showcases by focusing on extensive gameplay demos for only a handful of games. Bethesda's portfolio does not compare to industry giants like Microsoft, EA and Sony in terms of quantity. Instead of bulldozing through a whole bunch of trailers for a couple of dozen games, during Bethesda conferences each game gets a detailed presentation. They are only doing this for 3 years, yet they already do a better job than EA. Granted, that's easy to accomplish.
We get it.
I always enjoy the pacing and atmosphere of Bethesda's showcases. However, last year's 30-minute conference felt more like a Nintendo Direct and less like a proper E3 press conference. I appreciate Bethesda's willingness to solidify their presence at E3, but last year many people were wondering why a half-hour conference had to be a live conference in the first place. Then again, most publishers suffered from the same problem. Sony's conference was unusually brief and lacked noteworthy surprises. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't even sure if Bethesda would be confident enough to do another E3 conference this year. While I was compiling my list of Bethesda predictions, I soon noticed just how little is known about their upcoming titles. It proved exceptionally difficult to piece together a list of games likely to be revealed during Bethesda's conference. There's just not a whole lot to discuss since many Bethesda studios just released their games. The fact that we enter this conference with a giant question mark can mean one of two things. Either Bethesda's conference will be just as brief and unsurprising as last year's because they don't have enough to show yet, or they have quite a number of surprising titles we simply haven't heard about yet. Irredeemable optimist that I am, I choose to believe in the latter. Despite many question marks, I managed to gather 5 more or less self-evident predictions. Let's get started. Unfortunately, my first prediction isn't half as self-evident as it should be. Last year, Bethesda did a lot to satisfy the needs of single-player gamers. Titles like Prey, The Evil Within 2 and Wolfenstein 2 were all met with critical acclaim, mostly due to the great stories and characters they provided. In a year where more and more people lamented the decline of story-driven single-player experiences in the AAA gaming market, Bethesda remained fully committed to games all about stories and characters. Sadly, the critical success didn't translate into commercial success. If it weren't for the disappointing sales, I would have been absolutely certain that Prey, Wolfenstein 2 and The Evil Within 2 get new story DLC. Given the poor financial performance, the prospect for DLC content seems somewhat jeopardized. I still think there's a good chance of seeing story expansions for at least one of the mentioned titles. They certainly deserve it. While additional content for Bethesda's single-player games hangs in the balance, MMORPGs like Elder Scrolls Online are almost certain to receive a major update in the form of new expansions. More than 10 million players have enjoyed Elder Scrolls Online since release, and the game has around 2.5 million active players. In order to keep such a massive player base engaged, regular DLC content is a necessity. Fallout Shelter, Bethesda Game Studios' first mobile game, proved to be an even bigger success than many had anticipated. Therefore, it comes as no surprise that Todd Howard confirmed the studio is planning to invest further in the mobile gaming market. I think the reveal of a successor to Fallout Shelter or a completely new mobile game during Bethesda's E3 conference is more than likely. I mean, why wouldn't they do it? Games like Fallout Shelter are relatively easy to make and promise promise substantial amounts of profit. Fallout Shelter made over $5 million in its first 2 weeks. In an interview with Jeff Keighley, Pete Hines pretty much confirmed that we won't hear of Elder Scrolls 6 for a while. According to Hines, Bethesda Game Studios is currently working on 2 incredibly ambitious AAA games, both of which are gonna be released before Elder Scrolls 6. It doesn't take a genius to predict that we won't see a new Elder Scrolls this E3, but we might get something even more exciting, at least if you ask me. I have nothing against Fallout and Elder Scrolls, but I also would argue that it's time for something new. For that reason, I'm hoping to see the rumored sci-fi RPG Starfield, which apparently takes the open world formula of Fallout and Elder Scrolls to a space setting. Fallout's Commonwealth and the classic high fantasy landscapes of Elder Scrolls have become a little bit stale. So maybe a new IP can provide a breath of fresh air and reinvigorate Bethesda's dated open world blueprint. Of all the predictions I just made, a Doom 2 reveal is the least likely. In all honesty, I just included this prediction because id Software's Doom reboot is one of the best games of the current console generation in my opinion. I'm craving for a sequel. The fast-paced, energetic gameplay of Doom was such a welcomed change from all the sluggish, cover-based shooting in most other titles. I was outright addicted to the game for 2 weeks, mastering the intricacies of movement, enemy types and your weapon arsenal to the shockwaves of an aggressive heavy metal soundtrack in Doom is so insanely rewarding and fun. And that comes from a guy who usually does not get anything out of first-person shooters or metal. 2 years have passed since Doom's release. I don't know if a sequel is going to happen, but it certainly is the game I'm looking forward to the most. And that already concludes my Bethesda E3 prediction list. As I pointed out at the beginning of this video, we enter Bethesda's E3 conference with a big question mark. Many of their projects were just released or are still under wraps, which makes Bethesda's conference particularly intriguing. As always, I'd like to know what you guys hope to see at E3 and if you think I missed important games. Please consider subscribing to my channel and leaving a like, as it would help me immensely. Have a good one.